The title of this story is My Brother Got My Fiancée Pregnant. My dad handed him the family business and the house, so I made them regret it the hard way. Before we get into it, if you enjoy stories like this, take a second to like the video and subscribe. It doesn't cost you a thing, and it really helps us keep putting out more content like this. Your support honestly means a lot, and we'd love to have you along as the channel keeps growing. What my family has put me through lately is beyond messed up. But if you really want to understand why it hit me as hard as it did, I need to start at the beginning. I'm 33 years old, and I grew up with my younger brother, Ethan, who's 30. From the outside, we looked like a perfectly ordinary family. The reality inside our house was completely different. Ethan was always treated like some kind of miracle child. My mom had an incredibly difficult pregnancy with him, and during his first few years of life, he was constantly sick. He spent more time than any kid should in hospitals. Breathing issues, infections, doctor visits, you name it. Some of my earliest memories are of sitting in hospital waiting rooms while everyone worried about him. I understand why my parents were terrified back then. No parent wants to watch their child suffer. The problem was that even after Ethan recovered, they never stopped treating him like he was fragile, especially my dad. While Ethan was protected from everything, I was expected to be the mature older brother who always knew better. If Ethan skipped school, everyone said he needed more rest. If he failed a class, they reminded me how much he'd already been through. If he broke something expensive, I was told not to be upset with him. Meanwhile, I was expected to earn perfect grades, never argue, help around the house, and basically behave like a grown man starting when I was 7 years old. The favoritism wasn't even subtle. I still remember getting detention in high school because I was late to class once, and my parents grounded me for an entire week. That very same month, Ethan got caught skipping school so he could hang out with his friends at the mall. My parents simply sat him down for a calm conversation and acted like that was enough. When I turned 15, I started working for my dad's electrical company. It wasn't because I'd always dreamed of becoming an electrician. Honestly, I just wanted some acknowledgement from my father. Working beside him seemed like the only way to earn it. The funny thing is, I ended up loving the work. I threw myself into learning everything I possibly could. I stayed after hours whenever Dad tackled the complicated jobs. I'd read manuals in my spare time and spend nights watching YouTube videos so I could learn techniques nobody had shown me yet. While I was doing all that, Ethan was still, well, Ethan. He was intelligent whenever he actually applied himself, but hard work just wasn't in his nature. He could win people over with that helpless, poor, sick kid image he'd been using since childhood. Even though he'd been healthy for years. He enrolled in college, lasted about 2 semesters, then quit because he claimed the pressure was too much. After that, he launched some dropshipping business that sold cheap online junk, and that crashed pretty quickly. Then he decided he'd become a day trader and managed to lose a good chunk of my dad's money. Somehow, despite all that, I was still the one getting speeches about family loyalty and how I needed to support my brother. I'm not going to pretend that didn't mess with my head. I loved Ethan because he was my brother, but being around him often filled me with frustration. It was a strange mix of responsibility and resentment that I never really figured out how to deal with. We couldn't have been more different. I took pride in working hard, keeping my word, and doing things the right way. Ethan was the charming guy everyone liked, mostly because he never had to deal with the consequences of his actions and believed rules applied to everyone except him. My dad's electrical company wasn't anything flashy. We mostly handled residential work with the occasional light commercial project. It was a dependable business that kept the bills paid, but I could see it had room to grow. Whenever I wasn't out on a job site, I was researching newer technologies like smart home systems, security equipment, and modern electrical upgrades. Dad preferred doing everything exactly the way he'd done it for decades. I kept trying to convince him we needed to modernize and go after larger commercial contracts. The frustrating part was that even when I landed new customers or completed difficult jobs without a single issue, Dad somehow managed to give Ethan the credit. He'd say things like, "Your brother's personality really helps with customer relationships." The guy barely answered the office phone once in a while, yet Dad would insist Ethan had amazing business instincts. One of the biggest examples was when Ethan suggested building a company website in 2020, and Dad acted like he'd just invented the internet. As soon as I was financially able, I moved into my own apartment. It was about 20 minutes away from my parents' place. Close enough that I could still help run the business whenever I needed to, but far enough away that I finally had room to breathe. At that point, I honestly believed life was heading in the right direction. I had my own place, I was making decent money, and every year I became better at my trade. I even started planning to earn my master electrician's license and maybe open my own company one day. Around 6 years ago, I met a woman I'll call Claire. She was 29, and we met during a major rewiring project at a luxury apartment complex downtown, where she worked as the property manager. The first time I saw her, she was in the middle of arguing with an HVAC crew over work they had done. She wasn't just complaining either. She was pointing out technical problems and explaining exactly why their installation failed to meet code. I remember thinking to myself, wow. She actually understands what she's talking about. Most property managers I dealt with only cared about getting things finished as cheaply and quickly as possible. Claire wasn't like that at all. She had actually taken the time to study the electrical code and knew exactly how she wanted everything done. During the first few weeks of the project, she'd regularly stop by to check our progress. It never felt like she was hovering over us. She was genuinely curious about the work and wanted to understand why we did things a certain way. Before long, I found myself timing my lunch breaks so we'd end up eating around the same time. At first, our conversations revolved around the project, but eventually we started talking about everything else. She told me stories about growing up with her dad, who worked as a general contractor, and how she'd spent years helping him on construction sites. I opened up about my dream of modernizing my father's company and eventually expanding into larger commercial jobs. Talking to her felt effortless. I could vent about all the drama with my family, and she actually understood because she'd lived through something similar. Her own brother was the golden child too, a successful lawyer who could apparently do no wrong in his parents' eyes. We used to joke that people like us should start a support group for responsible older siblings. When the apartment project wrapped up, I assumed I'd probably never see her again. About a week later, though, the office got a call from Claire saying she had an urgent electrical problem in her apartment. Dad sent me over to handle it. When I got there, I discovered there wasn't actually anything wrong with her electrical system. She'd made the whole thing up because she wanted another excuse to see me. I have to admit it was a pretty clever move. Not long after that, we officially started dating. Claire was unlike anyone I'd ever been with before. She didn't play mind games or expect me to magically figure out what she was thinking. If something bothered her, she'd tell me directly. If she was happy, you never had to guess. She also took a real interest in my career. She helped me study for licensing exams and eventually started helping with the business itself. Within a year, she'd practically transformed the office. She created a new scheduling system, upgraded the invoicing process, and replaced Dad's handwritten estimates with real professional contracts. Dad resisted those changes at first because he preferred keeping everything on paper the old-fashioned way. Even so, he couldn't deny the company was operating far more efficiently than before. For the first time in my life, I genuinely felt like I was building something that had a future. After we'd been together for 2 years, we moved into a place together. Before long, we started talking seriously about getting married and eventually having children. Claire liked to joke that one day our kids would grow up to become electricians too and keep the family business alive. Looking back now, I honestly believed my life was falling perfectly into place. The ironic part is that my family loved Claire in the beginning. My mom was constantly asking us over for dinner, calling Claire whenever she needed help with her computer, or wanting her opinion before making changes around the house. Even my dad eventually came around after he saw how much Claire's ideas were helping the company. We started winning larger contracts, taking on more commercial jobs, and building a strong reputation throughout the area. Claire even seemed to get along really well with Ethan. Whenever I'd complain about another one of his failed business ideas, she'd sometimes defend him. She'd tell me I should try seeing things from his point of view and remind me that growing up so sick probably affected the way he looked at life. If I'm being honest, that should have been my first warning. But when you completely trust someone, you naturally ignore the things that should make you stop and think. For years into our relationship, I proposed. It wasn't some huge romantic production. I asked her to marry me at home after we'd wrapped up one of the biggest projects we'd ever worked on together. She had spent weeks helping me organize a massive electrical upgrade for a local hospital. Night after night, we'd sit together reviewing blueprints, coordinating with contractors, and solving problems as a team. Everything about that moment felt right. It honestly seemed like we were true partners in every part of our lives. Then, about a year ago, everything slowly started shifting. Ethan had managed to blow through another pile of my dad's money chasing some cryptocurrency trading scheme. Just like always, he came crawling back home completely broke. Instead of making him deal with the consequences, Dad handed him a job at our office. His responsibilities were simple enough. He answered phones, organized paperwork, and scheduled appointments. Even with easy tasks like that, Ethan still found ways to screw things up. Around that same time, Claire started spending a lot more time over at my parents' house. She said she was helping my mom plan the wedding and working on company paperwork there because she was teaching Ethan how to use all of our new office systems. Since I spent most of my days out on job sites, it sounded reasonable. At least it did back then. Not long after that, little things started happening that didn't seem important on their own. This was about 8 months before my entire world came crashing down. At first, they were just tiny changes. Nothing dramatic. Just small details that didn't quite fit together. Claire kept spending more and more time at my parents' place. According to her, she was still training Ethan on the invoicing software while helping Mom organize wedding plans. It sounded logical enough. I was out working long hours almost every day, doing everything I could to build the future we kept talking about. We were planning a wedding, looking at houses, saving money. I wanted to give us the life we both dreamed about. Then other things started feeling different. One day Claire changed the password on her phone. She'd never cared about that before. We both knew each other's passcodes, and neither of us had ever made a big deal out of it. Suddenly she became protective of it, explaining that her banking app wanted her to update all her security settings. I shrugged it off. I trusted her completely, so I didn't waste any energy wondering if there was more to it. Around the same time, Ethan started acting like a completely different person too. He suddenly started wearing cologne to work. This was the same guy who used to show up looking like he'd slept in yesterday's clothes. Then he bought a bunch of new outfits. He even started arriving at work on time, which honestly felt like some kind of miracle. What really stood out, though, was how unusually nice he became toward me. He volunteered to stay late at the office and kept talking about how badly he wanted to learn the business. I also noticed the way Claire started talking about him. She'd casually mention things like, "Ethan is getting really good at handling the scheduling." Or she'd say, "Your brother's actually pretty smart when he really applies himself." Whenever I pointed out one of Ethan's latest mistakes, she'd immediately defend him. Eventually, she even started taking his side during family arguments. The atmosphere around the office started feeling strange too. Our receptionist, Melissa, had been with the company for 15 years. She was practically family and always looked out for me like a second mother. Whenever Claire and Ethan stayed late together, Melissa would give me these odd looks. Every time I asked if something was wrong, she'd quickly say everything was fine and change the subject before I could press her. One afternoon, I came back to the office earlier than expected because we ran out of materials on a job site. When I walked into the break room, Claire and Ethan were laughing so hard they could barely talk. There wasn't anything obviously inappropriate happening. But the second they noticed me standing there, both of them practically jumped like I'd caught them doing something they weren't supposed to be doing. Claire immediately explained they were just reviewing invoices. At 7 o'clock at night. Sure. Another thing that changed was how little Claire talked about our future. She used to get excited discussing wedding plans, scrolling through house listings online, and imagining what our family would be like someday. Gradually, all of those conversations disappeared. Whenever I brought it up, she'd simply tell me work had been exhausting. The biggest warning sign, the one I completely ignored, was that she stopped visiting my job sites. That had always been our thing. She'd bring lunch, we'd walk through the project together, discuss problems, and figure out solutions side by side. Then suddenly she was always too busy. Too busy at the office. With Ethan. About 6 months before everything exploded, we all had a big family dinner together. Something felt off with Claire the entire evening. She barely joined the conversation and kept checking her phone every few minutes. Meanwhile, Ethan kept making these little inside jokes with her. At one point he mentioned, "That crazy guy from the office." Claire burst out laughing so hard she actually snorted. When I asked what was so funny, they exchanged a quick look before both saying the same thing. "You had to be there." The drive home was quiet for a while before I finally asked what had been bothering me. "Are you okay? You seemed distracted all night." She never looked up from her phone. "I'm just tired. Work's been crazy." I hesitated before saying, "Seems like you and Ethan have gotten pretty close lately." She stiffened for just a second before forcing herself to sound relaxed. "He's really not as bad as you always make him out to be. He's actually pretty funny once you get to know him." I looked over at her. "Funny enough that you barely talked to anyone else tonight?" She turned toward me immediately. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing. It just feels like you've been different lately. You've been distant, and you're always on your phone." She got defensive almost instantly. "So now I'm not allowed to have conversations with other people? Does everything have to revolve around you?" That response completely caught me off guard. Claire had never spoken to me that way before. "That's not what I meant," I told her. "It just feels like something's changed." She shook her head. "Maybe you're just being paranoid. Honestly tired of hearing you complain about Ethan all the time. He's trying." The moment she said that, I felt this awful knot form in my stomach. Something felt deeply wrong. I couldn't explain it, but my gut was screaming at me that something wasn't right. She had never defended Ethan like that before. I finally asked, "Since when did you become Team Ethan?" She answered without missing a beat. "Since I actually got to know him instead of listening to you criticize him all the time." After that, neither of us said another word for the rest of the drive. Looking back now, every warning sign was right in front of me. The secretive phone, the sudden defensiveness, the private jokes, the way she suddenly thought Ethan was such an amazing guy. But when you love someone and trust them with everything you have, convincing yourself they're betraying you, especially with your own brother, is the last thing your mind wants to believe. That night, I lay awake while Claire pretended to be asleep beside me. I remember staring at the ceiling, convincing myself I was imagining things. "You're just being paranoid," I kept telling myself. The next couple of months followed the exact same pattern. Claire was always working late. Ethan suddenly acted like he actually cared about the family business. And me? I was too blind to see what was happening. I spent 12-hour days busting my back trying to build a future for us, while my own brother was stealing the woman I planned to marry right under my nose. Then everything finally blew apart. It happened on a Tuesday. I remember the day clearly because I was rewiring a large commercial warehouse. Around 2 in the afternoon, Claire called me. She was crying so hard I could barely understand a single word she said. All she kept repeating was that she needed to see me immediately and that it couldn't wait. My first thought was that something terrible had happened to one of her parents. I told my crew there was a family emergency, jumped in my truck, and drove home as fast as I could. When I pulled into the driveway, Claire was sitting alone inside her car. She wouldn't even come into the house. She just sat there gripping the steering wheel so tightly it looked like it was the only thing keeping her from falling apart. I climbed into the passenger seat and waited. After what felt like forever, she finally spoke. "I'm pregnant." For a few seconds, all I felt was happiness. We'd already talked about having kids after the wedding, so my mind immediately jumped ahead. I started telling her we'd figure everything out together. I even joked that maybe we'd just move the wedding date up. She never smiled. Instead, she cried even harder. Then she whispered something that completely changed my life. "There's more." Her voice cracked. It might not be yours." Everything inside me froze. My brain refused to accept what I just heard. It honestly felt like I had to replay the sentence in my head because it couldn't possibly be real. Not mine. Even my own voice sounded unfamiliar. If it's not mine, whose is it? Then everything clicked into place all at once. The late nights. The hidden phone. The tension every time I mentioned Ethan. No. I looked straight at her, silently begging her to tell me I'd gotten it wrong. She couldn't. Tell me it isn't him. She just inhaled sharply. Claire. This time my voice came out harder. Tell me it isn't Ethan. She let out this tiny broken sound instead. It wasn't supposed to happen. I laughed. Not because anything was funny. It was the kind of laugh that comes out when your brain can't handle reality. Oh, of course, I said. You accidentally fell into my brother's bed? It wasn't like that, she rushed to say. It only happened once. I cut her off. One time, my head felt like it was going to split open. Stop lying to me. Tell me the truth. She didn't answer. How long? She struggled to breathe before finally speaking. 3 months. Then she hesitated. Maybe 4. I had to brace my hands against my knees just to stay steady. Does he know? My voice stayed calm somehow, even though I was falling apart inside. She nodded. I told him yesterday. That's when I realized I had to tell you too. She looked at me like I was supposed to appreciate her honesty, like confessing after months of lying somehow deserved credit. I couldn't stay in that car another second. I got out just trying to catch my breath. She followed me into the driveway, desperately trying to explain. She kept saying none of it had been planned. She said they both felt terrible. She claimed they'd already ended it weeks earlier. But all I could picture was the two of them laughing together in the office break room. Every late night suddenly made perfect sense. I stopped walking and turned toward her. Were you ever planning to tell me if you hadn't gotten pregnant? She never answered. She didn't have to. Her silence told me everything. I climbed into my truck and drove straight to my parents' house. I found Ethan exactly where I expected him, sitting in the office pretending to work. The second our eyes met, I knew. He knew that I knew. Listen, bro. I can explain. Honestly, the next few seconds are mostly a blur. I don't remember throwing the first punch. I just remember Ethan lying on the floor with blood pouring out of his nose. I remember my dad and 2 employees dragging me away from him. Ethan immediately started yelling that I'd lost my mind. Then he claimed Claire had been the one who came after him first. He even had the nerve to say they were in love. In love. My own brother. The same guy who watched me plan my future with that woman. The same guy who sat across from me at every Sunday dinner while secretly sleeping with my fiancée. Dad stepped between us, trying to calm everyone down. He kept saying we needed to act like adults. Then Ethan dropped another bomb. She's carrying my baby. Dad's face instantly turned white. That was obviously the first time he'd heard about the pregnancy. Mom completely broke down crying. Melissa quietly picked up her purse and walked out of the office. Later I found out she quit that very day. I looked at my father. He's your problem now. I'm done. Dad reached out to stop me. Son, wait. We can fix this. Family is family. I looked him straight in the eye. The moment Ethan slept with my fiancée, he stopped being family. Then I walked away. I never looked back. When I got home, Claire was still there. She'd packed a few bags and was sitting on the couch crying. I never wanted to hurt you, she whispered. It just got complicated. I didn't have anything left to give. You've got 24 hours. Take your things and get out. I don't care where you go. Block my number. And forget this address. She looked up at me. What about the baby? I stared back. You better hope it's Ethan's. If there's even a chance it's mine, we're getting a DNA test and letting lawyers handle the rest. She tried saying something else. I didn't stay to hear it. Instead, I left and spent the next several nights sleeping on my friend Ryan's couch while she moved out. Ryan was exactly the kind of friend I needed. He didn't lecture me. He didn't pretend to have all the answers. He simply gave me a place to stay and let me deal with everything in my own time. About a week later, I finally turned my phone back on. There were around 50 missed calls waiting for me. Most of them were from my parents. Several were from Claire. A few were even from Ethan. The nerve of that guy still amazes me. I ignored almost all of them. The only voicemails I listened to were my mom's. She cried through nearly every message. She begged me to come talk to Dad. She kept saying he'd figured out a solution. I should have known my father's version of a solution would only make things worse. Still, I went. Mostly because Mom sounded completely broken. Walking back into that house felt surreal. Everyone was waiting in the living room. Mom looked exhausted. She seemed like she hadn't slept in days. Dad sat in his favorite recliner wearing the same serious expression he always had before giving one of his speeches. Ethan was sitting there too. His swollen, bruised nose honestly made me smile for a second. Dad cleared his throat. "Son, I've been thinking about how we can resolve this situation in a way that benefits everyone." The moment he said, "benefits everyone," I knew I wasn't going to like whatever came next. He continued, "Since you've made it clear you won't reconcile with Claire, and considering her condition, I think the best solution would be for her and Ethan to get married." I burst out laughing, right there in his face. Not because it was funny, because it was completely insane. Dad kept talking anyway, and since they'll be starting a family, I believe Ethan should take over the business. With Claire's office experience and Ethan learning the trade, they could. I stopped him. Learning the trade? He can't wire a single outlet without someone standing over his shoulder. Dad shot me the same irritated look he'd given me my entire life. "Watch your language. Your brother has shown real interest in learning." Then he said something I'll never forget. "I want you to train him." Couldn't help it. I started laughing again. The kind of laugh that comes out when reality is so ridiculous your brain refuses to process it. "So let me understand this. You expect me to teach the brother who slept with my fiancée, so he can take over the company I helped build, while he raises a child that could actually be mine? Have you completely lost your mind?" Mom started crying again. Ethan just stared at the floor like the coward he'd always been. Then Dad played his final card. "The business is still legally mine. If you won't support your brother, maybe it's time you found another place to work." That was the exact moment everything became clear. Years of sacrifice, years of overtime, the customers I'd brought in, the reputation I'd spent years building. None of it mattered. Not compared to Ethan. It never had. I stood up without another word and headed for the front door. Mom tried stopping me. I simply shook my head. "I'm done. Good luck with your new dream team." For the first time all day, Ethan finally spoke. "Bro." "Wait." I turned around one last time. "Call me bro again. And next time I'll break a lot more than your nose." Dad shouted something behind me about loyalty, forgiveness, and family. I never turned around. The following morning, I started calling every major client I'd personally worked with over the years. I let them know I was leaving the company. Whenever they asked who they should use instead, I recommended contractors I genuinely trusted. Dad called me screaming, accusing me of trying to destroy the business. I calmly reminded him that I was only informing my own clients I wouldn't be handling their projects anymore. If they decided they didn't trust his new dream team, that wasn't my fault. As for Ethan and Claire, they went through with everything. Just 2 weeks later, they got married at the courthouse. Like it was some beautiful love story instead of the biggest betrayal I'd ever experienced. Dad even rewarded them afterward. He gave them money for the down payment on a house. Meanwhile, I was left trying to rebuild my entire life from the ashes. No real apology. No consequences. Everyone just expected me to accept it and move on. So eventually, I did. I walked away from all of them. I accepted a job with one of my dad's longtime competitors. For the first time in years, I worked somewhere that appreciated what I brought to the table instead of treating me like I was invisible. The pay was better. The respect was real. And best of all, there wasn't a single ounce of family drama. I poured everything I had into rebuilding my career. Not long afterward, I finally earned my master electrician's license. Dad always insisted I wasn't ready. Turns out I was. I simply needed to step out of his shadow to prove it. For roughly 4 months, I barely heard anything about the family business. Mom texted me every now and then, but I asked her not to mention Ethan or Claire. I wanted nothing to do with either of them. Then, last week, my phone rang around 11 at night. It was Mom. She was crying again. She said Dad desperately needed to talk to me. I almost hung up, but something about the way she sounded made me stay on the line. Please, she begged. I know you have every reason to refuse. But we're about to lose everything. That caught my attention. A moment later, Dad got on the phone. His voice was completely different. Gone was the arrogant man who always believed he had every answer. He sounded defeated, broken. Then he explained what had happened. Putting Ethan in charge had turned into exactly the disaster I'd warned him about. Ethan had managed to botch 3 major commercial projects. One of those clients was now threatening to sue the company over serious electrical code violations. I'm not talking about complicated technical errors either. These were basic, beginner-level mistakes. Wrong wire gauges, missing ground wires, junction boxes left uncovered. The kind of careless work that could literally start a fire and burn an entire building to the ground. And somehow it gets even worse. Instead of hiring licensed electricians who actually knew what they were doing, Ethan put one of his old college drinking buddies in charge as the head electrician. The guy's electrical experience amounted to changing a few light bulbs in his apartment. No license. No certifications. I seriously doubt he could have told the difference between a voltage tester and a screwdriver. Real professional operation they had going there. Then Dad explained the financial disaster. Apparently Ethan had forgotten to renew the company's liability insurance. Think about that for a second. An electrical company, operating without liability insurance. One accident, one electrical fire, one lawsuit. That would have been enough to wipe out everything. But why waste money on insurance when you can keep the cash for yourself? Because that's exactly what Ethan had been doing. Customers paid in cash. He'd pocket the money. Then somehow those payments never made it into the company's books. As if that wasn't enough, he'd secretly taken out several business loans behind Dad's back. Not just one loan, several. We're talking about a massive amount of money. The craziest part? Nobody could explain where any of it had gone. It wasn't sitting in his bank account. It wasn't invested. It had simply disappeared. Although, judging by the brand new car in his driveway and all the expensive designer clothes he'd suddenly started wearing, I had a pretty good guess. Honestly, I almost had to admire how quickly he'd destroyed everything. My dad had spent 30 years building that company from the ground up. Ethan managed to reduce it to rubble in less than 6 months. I guess that's what happens when you hand over a successful business to someone whose greatest accomplishment in life was becoming beer pong captain in college. Dad eventually uncovered everything after the insurance company canceled their policy. That forced him to start digging through the books. Turns out Ethan had been hiding the problems by altering paperwork. Claire taught Ethan how the office software worked. He later used that knowledge to alter records. Most of the experienced electricians had already quit. Honestly, I couldn't blame them. Ethan treated the employees terribly. On top of that, payroll checks had started bouncing. Melissa, our longtime receptionist, had actually tried warning Dad months earlier that something strange was happening with the company's finances. He ignored her, just like he'd ignored everyone else who questioned Ethan. By the time Dad finished explaining everything, I could hear his voice shaking. Then he finally said the words I never imagined I'd hear. Son, I need you to come back. Help me save this. We'll make you the majority owner. You'll have complete control. I told him I needed time to think about it. That answer clearly wasn't what he wanted. His voice became desperate. Please, we're going to lose everything. The business, the house, my life's work. Your mother isn't handling any of this. Then he played what he thought would be his strongest card. Ethan and Claire split up. She left last week. She disappeared. She left a note telling us not to contact her. We don't even know where she or the baby are. Looks like Ethan wasn't cut out to be much of a father after all. I didn't feel sorry for him. My answer was simple. Not my circus. Not my monkeys. Dad immediately switched back to talking about family loyalty and forgiveness. I stopped him before he could really get going. Do you remember when I begged you not to hand the business to Ethan? Do you remember me warning you this exact thing would happen? What was it you told me back then? Oh yeah. Family is family. Well, congratulations. This is your family's problem now. Mom got back on the phone after that. She was crying so hard I could barely understand her. She kept saying they were probably going to lose the house. That part actually hurt. Mom never deserved any of this. She was the only person who genuinely tried to keep everyone together. She never openly picked favorites. Even though maybe she should have. I told her she could move in with me whenever she wanted. There was only one condition. Just you. Not Dad. Not Ethan. She started crying even harder. I can't leave your father. I closed my eyes and sighed. Then that's your decision, Mom. But my door will always be open for you. Deep down, I already knew she'd never accept that offer. A few days later, I got a text from someone I never expected to hear from again. Claire. It read, asterisk, I know I'm the last person you want to hear from. Asterisk, but I need your help. Asterisk, I had a prenatal DNA test done. The baby is yours. Asterisk, Ethan took all my money and disappeared. Asterisk, please. Asterisk, I have nowhere else to go. Asterisk, I read the message. Then I read it again. I put my phone down without replying. And I still haven't answered. I don't plan to, but I'd be lying if I said those words didn't hit me hard. The message sat in my chest like a brick. Like seeing a punch coming but still having no idea how to brace for it. Finding out the baby was mine should have changed everything. It should have completely turned my world upside down. Instead, all I felt was tired, completely exhausted. I'd spent months dragging myself out of the wreckage of my old life. Now it felt like that same wreckage was reaching out, trying to pull me back under. For the first time since everything happened, I honestly didn't know what I was supposed to do. While I was still trying to process all of it, another surprise showed up. Last night, Dad came to my apartment. He didn't call first, didn't send a text. I came home from work and found him standing outside my door. He looked terrible. He was wearing an old jacket I remembered from when I was a kid. His face was covered with weeks of unshaven stubble. The first thing I noticed was that he wasn't driving his pickup anymore. Instead, he was behind the wheel of Mom's old Civic. Later, I learned they'd sold his truck to help pay off some of the business debts. When I walked up, he looked at me and quietly asked, "Can we talk?" There wasn't any of his usual authority in his voice. No demands. No lectures. He just sounded exhausted. I let him inside. Part of me actually wanted him to see that I'd built a good life without him. I'd recently moved into a nicer apartment after getting promoted. It wasn't some luxury place, but it belonged to me. I'd earned every bit of it on my own. Dad stood in the middle of my living room looking strangely uncomfortable. It almost seemed like he didn't know how to speak to me unless he was giving instructions. Eventually, he sat down. Then everything poured out. The business is finished. We've got 2 commercial clients preparing lawsuits because of Ethan's work. Most of our residential customers left after word spread about unfinished jobs. The bank is coming for the house next month. Then he looked me straight in the eyes. I should have listened to you. I'd waited my entire life to hear those words. It was the first time I'd ever known my father to admit he'd been wrong. I nodded. It's nice hearing that. It's just about 6 months too late. Without saying anything else, he reached into a folder he'd brought with him. He slid a stack of documents across the table. Inside were legal papers transferring complete ownership of the company to me. 100%. No partners. No conditions. I spoke to the lawyer after our phone call. There's nothing left for Ethan to inherit. If anyone has a chance of saving what's left, it has to be you. So I signed everything over. You can still save it, he said quietly. You always knew what you were doing. I was too stubborn to admit it. The crazy part? Half a year earlier, those papers would have meant everything to me. They were everything I'd spent years fighting for. validation, control of the business. My father finally admitting I was the one who'd been right all along. I sat there staring at the paperwork for a long moment before finally looking up. "What happened to Ethan?" I asked. The expression on Dad's face completely fell apart. He told me Ethan had emptied what was left of their savings account the previous week and vanished without a trace. All he'd left behind was some ridiculous note about needing to find himself. Typical Ethan. He always created the disaster, then disappeared before anyone could hold him accountable. Dad lowered his voice. "He's still your brother." I shook my head. "No. He stopped being my brother the moment he decided family loyalty didn't matter anymore." Then I looked him straight in the eyes. "Sound familiar?" That one landed. I could see it all over his face. Good. After a long silence, he started trying to convince me again. He talked about rebuilding the company together. He said we could work side by side. That maybe we could finally become a real family again. I couldn't help laughing. "Dad, you're still not listening. I don't want the business. I don't need your help. I'm done." He looked genuinely confused. "But it's your legacy too." I shook my head again. "No. Everything I built. You handed to Ethan. You made that decision after he slept with my fiancée. Now you have to live with it." Just like before, he tried bringing Mom into the conversation. He told me she was heartbroken because the family had fallen apart. I gave him the same answer I'd already given him. My offer still stands. Mom can stay with me anytime she wants. Just her. He looked down at the floor. "She won't leave me." I sighed. "That's her decision. But living with the consequences of your choices? That's yours." For a while, neither of us spoke. Eventually, he asked me something so quietly I almost didn't hear it. Where did I go wrong? Part of me wanted to tell him everything. I wanted to remind him of every excuse he'd ever made for Ethan. Every time he treated us differently. Every opportunity he'd thrown away because he refused to see who was actually carrying the business. He traded away the son who cared for the company for the one who treated it like a personal ATM. But in the end, none of that mattered anymore. So I simply looked at him and said, "You didn't go wrong. You got exactly what you always wanted. Ethan running the business." Then I asked one last question. "So, how'd that work out?" Not long afterward, he stood up and left. Watching him walk away, he looked 20 years older than when he'd arrived. The next morning, Mom sent me a text. She said they were moving to Ohio the following month to stay with her sister. Dad planned on finding whatever work he could out there. She asked me one last time if I'd reconsider helping them stay. I gave her the same answer. "My offer hasn't changed. You can always stay with me. But I'm done setting myself on fire just to keep everyone else warm." Every now and then, Claire still sends me messages about the baby. I told her from the beginning that everything goes through our lawyers. That's still my position. I haven't heard a single word from Ethan. Honestly, I don't expect I ever will. The strange part is that I always imagined watching all of them lose everything would feel satisfying. I thought seeing karma finally catch up to them would bring some kind of peace. Didn't. I wasn't happy. I wasn't even angry anymore. Mostly, I just felt finished. Last month, I started seeing someone new. We're taking things slowly. One day she asked me about my family. All I told her was that we aren't very close. Maybe someday I'll tell her the whole story. Right now, though, I'd rather focus on building a life that belongs to me. A life without constant drama. Without toxic family dynamics. Without spending every day chasing approval that was never going to come. As for Claire, I've made my position crystal clear. Everything goes through the attorneys. Will I be there for my child if the DNA results prove I'm the father? Absolutely. I'm nothing like my brother. I don't run away from my responsibilities. But any relationship Claire and I might have once had is gone forever. She burned that bridge beyond repair. We'll handle custody, child support, and everything else through the legal system. She made her decisions. Now she has to live with the consequences, just like everyone else involved in this mess. For now, my priority is keeping my life moving forward. I'm focused on my career, my new relationship, and creating something that's mine alone. Some nights I still lie awake thinking about how unfair it is that my child will be born into such a complicated situation. But I've learned something through all of this. You can't undo someone else's bad choices. The only thing you can control is whether you make the right ones yourself. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. Sometimes it's simply building a better life and refusing to let the past define you. Edit asterisk. This is the final update, everyone. Thanks for sticking with me through the whole story. Writing everything down has honestly helped me process a lot of what happened. Edit 2 asterisk. Since so many people have asked the same question, here's my answer. Yes. If the DNA test proves the baby is mine, I'll step up and be a father. But every part of that process will go through our lawyers. There won't be any direct contact between Claire and me.